At least since Carl Jung, students of human experience have suggested that storytelling is a significant human activity. I'd like to introduce you to four more thinkers who suggest it may be a lot more than just that. Their view is far more radical. The first thinker I want to introduce you to is a long-dead philosopher. The second, a neurologist. The third, an historian. And the last, a living philosopher. All of these thinkers suggest that storytelling is not significant in human life. It is the definitive characteristic of humanity. We're not talking history. We're not talking psychology. We're talking philosophy. The first person we'll talk about is the 17th century philosopher John Locke. In his, in my opinion, most important book, Essay Concerning Human Understanding, Locke, in a chapter on identity, tries to describe what it is to be a person. He looks at the question of, are we our bodies? And concludes that no, we can't be our bodies, because if we chop off parts of our body, we still stay ourselves. Fundamentally, the person involved is still the same. Still entitled to the same benefits and punishments, still entitled to the same claims about the world, just perhaps altered in some way. Losing a little finger, as Locke suggests, or just getting older and more wrinkled. Any way you look at it, there must be something else. He doesn't want to call it a soul or a spirit because, again, the body makes up such an important component of human experience that to exclude the body in favor of something else is a mistake, he thinks. What he suggests does play this role is consciousness. He suggests that a consciousness can be identified by its memory. In other words, it can be identified by the story that it can tell about itself. Over the years, a lot of people have criticized Locke's position, but it's a hard one to completely get away from. We must have something to do with this continuing story about this body, this series of experiences, this self. The neurologist, Michael Graziano, suggests in his book Rethinking Consciousness, we're observing the world using a physical structure he refers to as the cortical attention strata. In the book, he discusses how this strata has developed from earlier structures going all the way back to, as I remember, the jellyfish. But at any rate, he talks about in particular relationship to the reptile mind and gets us all the way through to the present. And he shows how you can just look at this portion of the brain as a collector of information that it discovers through its ability to focus on one thing or another. What seems to set human beings off is their ability to have a second level. He refers to the one as overt attention, when I'm actually looking at something, the way animals keep track of things in the wild, or a covert attention. This covert attention strata is the part where storytelling seems to play a role. He suggests that the information within it provides a cartoonish account of how the highest levels of cortical attention take possession of items. There is no simple physical roving eyeball as in the case of overt attention. Instead, that cartoonish account describes an essence that has no specific physical substance, but has a location vaguely inside you. It is this level of attention, this level of consciousness, that sets us apart from other animals. This is what makes us most human, this cartoonish account. Now, I don't think he's suggesting that it's like watching Mickey Mouse or Bugs Bunny. I think he's trying to suggest that the vision in our head may or may not actually match reality perfectly, but just as a caricature captures the essence of a person or a cartoonist captures the essence of an action, our secondary level of attention captures the essence of what's going on in the world around us, enabling us then to deal with what we have to overtly, the thing we're looking right at, while covertly being aware of the entire environment. Without these two things working together, an internal sense of self, an awareness of my ability to keep track of the world, just can't happen. This kind of thing has been examined for years, but no one has offered such a clear physiological account as has Dr. Graziano. Yuval Noah Harari tries to answer the question, why did it take so long? That is to say, the human organism had been around for around 250,000 years, maybe a little more, before any big breakthroughs were made. We had fire, so what? That hadn't changed anything. Why weren't we more successful than the other primates? Why were we still in the middle of the food chain instead of the top where we are today? Well, what Dr. Harari suggests is that our ability to tell stories about things that aren't empirically obvious made it possible for us to get together and create a society based on abstract ideas. Abstract ideas. You know, those cartoonish things that go on inside of our heads. Those things which aren't empirically verifiable in the world, but are part of our story we tell ourselves about how we live. So Dr. Harari calls this the great cognitive revolution, to match the industrial and agricultural revolutions of later in human history. This cognitive revolution, this ability to talk about abstractions, to communicate about things that haven't happened yet, to generalize in a way that other animals just can't manage. But again, I want you to take a look. It's a story we're telling. It's a story we're telling ourselves about the nature of the world, just like the story that Dr. Graziano has us telling ourselves in order to make sense of the world, that Dr. Locke tells us about the world so that we're able to continue our identity throughout time. And yes, he was a medical doctor, Locke was, but he was still a doctor. This then is how Dr. Harari tells the story. The truly unique feature of our language is not its ability to transmit information about men and lions, rather its ability to transmit information about things that do not exist at all. Legends, myths, gods, and religions appeared for the first time with the cognitive revolution. Many animals and human species previously could say, "Careful, a lion." Thanks to the cognitive revolution, Homo sapiens acquired the ability to say, "The lion is the guardian spirit of our tribe." This ability to speak about fictions is the most unique feature of Sapiens language. And now let us turn our attention to the work of Alasdair McIntyre, a living philosopher whose work after virtue has been very influential in modern ethics. One of McIntyre's most important ideas suggests that virtue ethics, that is the ethics of character of an entire person, does a better job of provoking moral activity in people and explaining how best to judge people, superior to the individual action ethics that have become more popular since the Enlightenment. One need only look at Kant and his reference to is this or that action according to the categorical imperative, or Mill and utilitarianism, judging whether or not this or that action brings about more or less happiness in the world. McIntyre suggests that only in context of a tradition, only in the context of some end goal for life, only in the context of a narrative that explains a person's whole pattern of life, can we make genuine ethical judgments and lead genuinely ethical lives. Sound familiar? The story makes it good or bad. The story explains how we get together and communicate. The story explains consciousness, explains who we are. Without this story, we don't have any notion of being human. I'm going to suggest that explains a lot. It explains our fascination with story, why we want to be told a story. Tell me a story, we say as young people. We love to turn to stories, whether they're in comic books or in movies, whether we read them to ourselves, read them to others, see them produced in theater or on television. Stories drive us. They not only drive us culturally, they drive us physically. If we can trust Dr. Graziano's idea, and I think we can, it is the interior story that makes consciousness possible. We are become story listeners and storytellers in order to be human. Remember, it's the fictions that we learn to tell that Dr. Ferrari suggests made the great cognitive revolution possible, enabled us to stop being fairly successful hunter-gatherers and turn us into the civilized creatures we are today. The story makes us human. It's why I'm trying to give in these little encounters stories that will communicate to you the truths, the failures, the discussions that have driven philosophy since its beginning. Well, that's it for today. Hope you'll come back. Hope you enjoyed what you heard today. You'll find a list of references down below if you want to go and track down more on these philosophers that we've talked about, the historian, the neurologist, and their wonderful ideas. If you'd like to get involved in some way, producing these programs, that information is there too. I do hope if you have any questions, you'll ask below. I'm not through with this idea, and I hope you aren't either. Keep talking philosophy.